After such a long time, the wait is finally over for Black Widow. At last, the film answered all of our lingering questions about Black Widow's origin. Of course, this being Marvel, the only way that you could truly get all of her story is if you were an eagle-eyed comic book nerd who had read a lot of Black Widow comics, and luckily for you, that's exactly what we train our agents to do. Let's go. If you're anything like me, the one part of Nat's story that we were dying to know about was that legendary Budapest story that she referenced in the Avengers while her and Clint were fighting off those alien invaders. While we didn't get the flashback scene that I specifically asked Kevin Feige for, we got the next best thing. If you look really closely, you can make out how the whole thing went down. In the Budapest apartment, there are arrow markings on the wall that imply he and Nat fought there. We know that Clint got the order to take her out but made a different call. She ended up defecting, and in order to prove herself, she and Clint blew up Dreykov's building. This led to a massive battle through the streets of Budapest that apparently resembled a Chitauri army, at least to Nat, that is. The two then hid together in an event where we could see that they spent their time playing tic-tac-toe, hangman, and becoming best friends. It would be so sweet if her little sister weren't trying to track him down to avenge her. In the original Avengers, Loki gives about as much of Natasha's backstory we would get for years. He made Clint spill all the beans about all of her greatest sins, or the red in her ledger. Among the many horrible things that Natasha had done in her career for both S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Red Room, the worst seemed to have something to do with Dreykov's daughter. Now we've learned that Nat tried to take out both Dreykov and his daughter as collateral damage in order to defect. This failed and allowed Dreykov to slink into the shadows. His daughter, meanwhile, went on to become the Taskmaster. That certainly is a lot of red in her ledger. There's one really quick line in Black Widow that references one more part of Marvel's Russian stories. Yelena mistakenly calls Alexei the Crimson Dynamo instead of Red Guardian. Crimson Dynamo was actually a villain in Marvel Comics. Whereas Red Guardian was the Russian Captain America, Crimson Dynamo was like the Russian Iron Man. He was thrown into a blender with the character Whiplash for Ivan Vanko in Iron Man 2. That being said, there were several Crimson Dynamos in the comics, so we could see one pop up in Armor Wars when Rhodey finally gets his own solo series. Yelena was a surprisingly fun character, wasn't she? While the trailers certainly showed off her chops as an action star, they did not let us know that she would be cracking us up every other scene. Remember when Nat said beep beep in Age of Ultron? I always imagined the Widows to be just a little strange, like someone who hasn't been around people much and mumbles to themselves and stuff, you know? Just kind of weird, but in a good way. Her best running gag by far concerned the first clothing item that she ever purchased, her jacket that had a ton of pockets. It turns out that this jacket was hiding in front of us the entire time. Natasha was actually wearing Yelena's jacket during Infinity War. I hope she got it back. In one of the cutest sequences that we see in the entire series, we see that Natasha had a secret love of James Bond movies. How big of a fan was she? Well, she could quote Roger Moore's Moonraker line by line, so I'd say a pretty big fan. Moonraker wasn't just chosen to show Natasha's hobbies, though. That movie ends with Bond fighting a giant floating base that looked a lot like Dreykov's Red Room base. I'm just glad that she did not have Scarlet Witch's powers, or she would have made a small town live out a series of Bond films over and over, like in WandaVision. The opening sequence of Black Widow spent a lot of time showing just how deep Dreykov's influence went. How did they pull this off so quickly? They used the old Forrest Gump tactic of inserting him next to real-life historical figures. Instead of the likes of JFK and Nixon, Dreykov was placed next to leaders like President Bill Clinton and President Vladimir Putin. What's kind of funny is that all of those historical figures are now canon in the MCU. Taskmaster might be one of the most intimidating villains we've seen since the Winter Soldier first showed off his knife trick against Cap. While the comic character is a villain named Anthony Masters, the MCU version is revealed to be Antonia Dreykov. While that was a pretty big change, how Taskmaster fought remained the same. Every single move Antonia made was a reference to other MCU fighters like Black Panther, Hawkeye, Captain America, or even Natasha herself. What's sad is I've probably seen that airport fight scene from Civil War more times than Antonia, and I cannot do any of those moves. We all need friends like Rick Mason. Natasha's very own independent contractor came through for her across the movie with any safe house or secondhand helicopter that he could find. It probably won't surprise you that Mason is another spy character in the comics, known as the Agent. Seeing as he'll pretty much work for anyone, it would not be surprising if Mason starts showing up all over the place like Jimmy Woo or Coulson. It's kind of a funny coincidence that the woman who ended up playing Nat's adopted mother was none other than Rachel Weisz. Not only would she have been a top contender to play Natasha Romanoff in the late 90s, but she's married to current Bond actor Daniel Craig. According to her, at one point, both Black Widow and No Time to Die were scheduled to release the same weekend. While they were having a summit meeting about it online, Craig was literally walking around behind them as Kevin Feige was discussing how to handle the Bond movie problem. Evidently, Weisz really wanted to say, well, he's right here, you can ask him. Black Widow's mission statement was to answer every single question about Nat's life that we've ever asked, and apparently some that we didn't. The movie ended with Mason acquiring the special Quinjet team Cap uses in Infinity War to save Wanda and Vision before flying to both Avengers HQ and Wakanda. I didn't know that we were going to get the Jet's origin story too, but now I'm really interested where it ended up, or what used Quinjet dealership Mason bought it off of. If there was something very familiar to you about that car chase scene with Taskmaster, that was no accident. The sequence was clearly modeled after the legendary chase scene from one of the greatest action movies of all time, Terminator 2. Not only does it have similar action beats, but even the score references some of the best moments from the chase. If Taskmaster does come back for another adventure, hopefully she keeps the Terminator references coming. Someone has to, now that Bucky's no longer Marvel's resident Terminator, the Winter Soldier. Okay, I've got to come clean. While Black Widow definitely lived up to the hype, there was one thing I was hoping for that did not come. A cameo by Clint Barton. Well, a physical cameo, I mean. Jeremy Renner did have a brief vocal cameo talking to Nat through her earpiece during the Budapest mission.
We need confirmation Dreykov's in the building.
While I would have loved to see the entire Budapest story play out with both Nat and Clint, at least we got a little taste of it. Though, I wouldn't mind if they showed it all during the Hawkeye Disney Plus show coming out later this year, huh? Just saying, Disney, there's still time. If it seemed weird to you that Black Widow made an abrupt costume change to a white supersuit during Alexi's breakout, it's because it was a reference to one of the film's favorite Black Widow comic runs. In the series Black Widow Deadly Origin, Natasha is seen wearing the now iconic white uniform as snow camouflage, though it definitely came in handier during that story. It may have been snowy where Alexei was locked up, but they didn't do any covert ops in the snow. I'm not sure the bright white suit really did her any favors fighting in a prison, but hey, I'm not the super spy Avenger. One of the best scenes in the film was when Alexei was arm wrestling literally everyone in prison while telling tall tales about his time as the Soviet superhero, the Red Guardian. While one prisoner was not very impressed with his stories, the massive prisoner known as the Great Bear took issue with the timeline of Alexei's story about taking on the still frozen Captain America. Well, in the comics, the Great Bear was another Russian superhero who actually resembled a big bear. I would say that there's still time for him to become a hero like his counterpart, but I don't think that arm of his is going to be fighting anyone, ever again. If Alexei's stories weren't enough to keep the other prisoners entertained, his vast collection of tattoos probably do. His entire body is covered in Soviet propaganda, ideology, and references to his superhero past. I mean, his fists have Karl and Marx tattooed on them. What I find interesting is how reminiscent the tats are to another Marvel character, Ivan Vanko. Is it possible that Ivan and Alexei were tatted up by the same prison artist? According to my headcanon, they were. While discussing the experiments done upon the widows, Melina dropped a line that should be very interesting to Marvel fans eager to hear anything that hints at the X-Men. She stated directly that girls were passed through the program if they had some sort of genetic potential. This is very reminiscent of the language Hydra used to describe Wanda Maximoff when they were experimenting on her. Could this line be another brick Marvel is laying for the foundation of the mutants? I certainly hope so. That mind-controlled super soldier stick is awfully close to the Weapon X program, don't you think? Melina may have gotten the least attention of the Widow family, but that doesn't mean that there is not a lot of untapped potential for the character. In the comics, she was a super spy by the name of Iron Maiden who always lived in the shadow of Black Widow's greatness. This led to them clashing on more than one occasion. Melina's Iron Maiden mask is shown in her weapons room for a brief second, hinting that more action may be coming in her future. Something tells me we will see her put that mask on in a movie or a TV show sometime soon. Black Widow begins with Natasha's fake family completing their mission in America. Apparently, they were there to infiltrate something called the North Institute. This was apparently the Hydra base where they experimented on Bucky to master the tech used to control his mind. This institute was based on real experiments the CIA conducted on mind control, Project MK Ultra. Chances are that we'll see the mind control room the Institute patented again at some point in the MCU. It's worked pretty well for Hydra and the Red Room, so who knows who will be using it next. It seems right that Black Widow's origin story would feature all of Natasha's greatest hits since 2010. She used her standard interrogation tactic that worked on Loki, where she puts on a sad face and makes the villain monologue out his plan without realizing it. She even ended her interrogation of Dreykov with the same "thank you for your cooperation" line. Not only that, but in the same scene, she used the cool Mission Impossible face mask she used in Winter Soldier. Most importantly, there's the infamous Black Widow pose that Yelena makes fun of her for before trying it out herself. I mean, it is a pretty cool pose. If you loved Black Widow and all you want is more, well, you are in luck. The movie is heavily based on the story Black Widow: Deadly Origins. This is the story of how Romanoff became the legendary Black Widow. It goes through her childhood and sends her on an adventure that sees her past and present colliding. The easiest way to get more Marvel action is to go right to the source. Alexei really hates Captain America. The only thing he hates more than his Western super soldier competition is that he never got a chance to fight him. This in and of itself is a reference to the comics. The Red Guardian is often depicted as a Captain America villain. The two have fought many times in the comics, just how Alexei always wanted. Frankly, I think the MCU version got off easy. We didn't get to see him in his prime, but it's pretty clear that Steve would have obliterated him. I don't know if Alexei would have ever gotten over it. There was something very familiar about the opening sequence of Black Widow. That's because Nat was apparently living out the plotline of one of my favorite shows of all time, The Americans. Just like with Nat's childhood, the famous FX series dealt with a sleeper agent family that posed as Americans while spying for the KGB. Both were based on real-life stories of sleeper agents that lived in the US. So if the opening sequence really spoke to you, try The Americans out, or look up stories of the real-life spy families who lived out this Avenger's life. The end credits sequence for Black Widow revealed that Yelena was now working for a shadowy figure played by none other than Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Thanks to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we know that she's actually Contessa Valentina Allegra de la Fontaine, sometimes known as Madame Hydra. She has also recruited John Walker to be her US agent for purposes that we don't know yet. Could she be forming her own Dark Avengers? Well, I'm pretty sure we're gonna find out when Yelena goes after Clint and Hawkeye later this year. Despite the fact that we meet Natasha's fake parents in Black Widow, there's very little we or Nat ever learn about them. The film reveals that her mother was actually taken out and buried in an unmarked grave by Dreykov. Nat doesn't learn about her father until years later when the Red Skull informs her that she is the daughter of Ivan. While this is most likely a reference to Ivan Petrovich from Black Widow's origin story, some MCU fans think it may be referring to Iron Man 2's Ivan Vanko instead. Frankly, I just don't see the family resemblance. Obviously, there is one Black Widow mystery that has been driving Marvel fans wild more than any other. When did Black Widow dye her hair blonde? I know. Thankfully, Marvel decided to answer the question by showing Nat with a box of hair dye at the beginning of the movie. By the film's end, she has the look she sports throughout Infinity War. Now, if they'll only answer my questions about when she got her hair straightened before Winter Soldier. I mean, the people need answers, Marvel.
Oh! What is that?
Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings delivered one of the MCU's best standalone features yet, thanks to kinetic fight choreography, a charming new leading man, plenty of heart and humor, and of course, a compelling and complex villain played by Hong Kong legend Tony Leung. But I know your eyes were probably distracted by the awesome martial arts, the amazing dragon fight, and of course, Trevor Slattery, but there were a ton of hidden details packed into Marvel's latest movie. Did you catch all these Easter eggs and hidden references? Let's find out right now. One of the big trailer moments leading up to the release of the Shang-Chi movie was the final shot of the film's second trailer, which saw Abomination make his grand return while fighting none other than Wong in a cage match. This was a big deal as Tim Roth's Emil Blonsky hasn't been around since the Phase 1 movie The Incredible Hulk, and that movie tends to be ignored by the MCU since it features an Ed Norton-looking Bruce Banner. But I don't think anyone predicted the way this scene ultimately played out in Shang-Chi. While the two characters fought, both got to display their impressive skill sets, with Abomination using his brute force and Wong using his portals to make Abomination knock himself out. And you would think that would be it, but there's actually more. After the fight, Wong and Abomination are talking, and it's revealed that the two are working together right before Wong opens up a portal for them to leave. It's hard to make out, but the other end of the portal doesn't look like the Sanctum Sanctorum. It actually looks like the Raft Prison, which is the super secret and super secure prison in the middle of the ocean that housed the Rebel Avengers in Civil War. Is Abomination now being housed in the raft while Wong works to rehabilitate him? If so, why? Is Wong helping train Abomination? It seems that way based on their dialogue. Or is this some sort of off-the-books operation that just wanted to see Wong make a little extra money on the side? So many questions. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings featured a surprising cameo from a Spider-Man Homecoming character.
And I heard a rumor. You know who he is?
No, unfortunately, it wasn't anyone major, but it was still a lot of fun. The vlogger on the bus in Shang-Chi's standout action sequence is the same guy who yelled at Spider-Man in Homecoming and asked him to do a flip. His name is Clev, and you have to wonder if these two appearances are going to set up more appearances down the line. Will he be someone who cameos in multiple movies? I wouldn't mind seeing him pop up again and reveal more about his mysterious past. I mean, in Shang-Chi, we learned he did a little martial arts as a kid. How fascinating. Maybe we can expect him to show up in the Eternals and talk about how he's a history buff, so would know the details about the Eternals' presence on Earth. Don't flip! Or have him in Blade or something to freak out over vampires. Either or. Sure, why not? The mid-credit scene in Shang-Chi was one of the most memorable stingers in a long time. It not only set up the sequel perfectly with a compelling mystery, but it also welcomed Shang-Chi and Katie to the Avengers. Which, quick side note, I get inviting Shang-Chi, but Katie, she just learned how to use a bow and arrow a few days earlier. What, are you looking to replace Hawkeye or something? Anyways, before the awesome ending where Shang-Chi, Katie, and Wong go karaoke singing, we get quick glimpses of Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner. That's right, I said Bruce Banner. But where's Professor Hulk? Endgame established that Bruce and Hulk worked out their differences by Bruce spending 18 months in a gamma lab to fuse their brain and the brawn together permanently.
Best of both worlds.
So why is Bruce in human form in the mid-credit scene? Does it have something to do with the snap he did? His arm is still in a sling after all, suggesting that the damage there is permanent. This is something that absolutely needs to be addressed, and with Mark Ruffalo set to return in the She-Hulk TV show, look for answers there. When Shang-Chi and Katie travel to meet Shang-Chi's sister, they're met with a bit of a surprise. After checking out a seemingly run-down building, it's revealed to be the site of an epic and secretive fight club that's popular on the dark web all around the world. As the two heroes make their way through the crowd of interesting-looking fighters, one thing stands out. In one of the smaller cages, there's a fight going on that sees an extremist soldier in the middle of a brawl. It's never mentioned, but the glowing red body is a complete giveaway. The extremist soldiers were, of course, the main villains in Iron Man 3, and although it looked like all of them were dispatched by the end of the movie, it's clear now there are more running around. And yes, I know we saw the extremist soldiers play a part in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but it's hard to tell how canon that show is anymore. Trevor Slattery is back. We all sort of expected it one way or another, but you gotta admit that Trevor's role in the new movie unfolded in a way you didn't expect. Like, could anyone have guessed that Trevor was going to be the one who had the key to guiding our heroes to the secret city thanks to his connection with a mythical faceless creature named Morris? I don't think so. And in the film, we do get a retelling of Iron Man 3 and how the villains took the Mandarin name because Wenwu was retired. But on top of that, Trevor tells the story about how a producer interviewed him in jail, but then broke him out to take him to the real Mandarin.
No, sorry. I still don't get it.
Just in case you didn't see it, this was actually a reference to the Marvel one-shot known as All Hail the King, which was included on the Thor The Dark World DVD, but of course can now be viewed on YouTube. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. I mean, it even includes a Justin Hammer cameo. When's he coming back? The MCU has changed forever thanks to the blip. But we're still calling it that? As Ant-Man would say, is it too late to change the name? Anyways, thanks to Thanos' actions, half of Earth disappeared for 5 years before surprisingly coming back. Every post-Endgame movie will have to address this in some capacity going forward. And although it was a major plot point in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it was treated as more of a joke in Spider-Man Far From Home, as they just said, oh, all of Peter's class was snapped away and came back to get over any weird narrative hurdle. And they kind of did it with Shang-Chi too. Were any of the main characters affected by the snap? If Wenwu wasn't snapped away, how did his crime organization function for those 5 years? Those types of questions hurt my brain. All we really got in reference to the events of Endgame were posters plastered around San Francisco talking about support groups for blip anxiety. I guess that's better than nothing. This one is more of a meta reference. In a funny scene, Shang-Chi has to explain the fact that he's not Korean, which feels mostly like a shout out to Simu Liu's breakout role in the hit comedy Kim's Convenience. In that show, Liu plays the son of a Korean couple who run a convenience store in Toronto. The show is Canadian and it became a huge crossover success in the United States, much like the award-winning comedy Schitt's Creek. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. In real life, Liu was born in China and immigrated to Canada when he was 5 years old. The secret fight club that Xialing runs is called the Golden Daggers Club, which is a pretty cool name for anything if I'm being honest. Put golden in front of any sort of weapon and make that your name for a restaurant, bar, sporting arena, mini mall, anything like that, and you'll have yourself a popular place. But the Golden Daggers name actually is a fun comic reference. In the Shang-Chi comics, Golden Daggers is a name of a gang that one of Shang-Chi's sisters, known as Bao Yu, formed when she escaped her father's control. You see, in the comics, Shang-Chi doesn't have one sister, he has a bunch of them. And although that wasn't the same in the movie, the writers seemed to take elements from each sister and combine them together to make the entirely new character of Xialing. Jackie Chan is one of the most famous martial artists in the world. Obviously a legend in his own country, Chan also is a huge international star and people around the world grew up watching his movies that combined jaw-dropping martial arts with a perfect blend of comedy. I mean, I'll say Rush Hour 2 is a personal favorite movie of mine, which I've seen at least 30 times. He's amazing to watch, so it's no surprise that Shang-Chi, a movie all about martial arts, would want to pay homage to one of the greats. It's been said that in the bus fight, which again I'll say is an absolute triumph of a fight scene, there's an instance where Shang-Chi uses his jacket as a weapon. A lot of people have said this looks very similar to the move Jackie Chan uses in Rumble in the Bronx, and it turns out this was intentional. Simu Liu has talked about how much they wanted to include a reference to Chan. Mission accomplished. Now the next movie should include a scene where Shang-Chi jumps through a tiny grate in a casino, just like Rush Hour 2. I mean, they already had a bamboo fight, so why not? Shang-Chi traditionally wears a lot of red in his costume, and going into the film, it was a wonder to see if his superhero duds would lean more traditionally or have a bit of a modern update. For a while there, it looked like Shang-Chi would just be wearing plain clothes throughout the movie. His first outfit had a red and white color scheme, and the way he moved around in it convinced me that Shang-Chi doesn't necessarily need a special costume to look cool and perform his awesome kung fu. Maybe he was just going to be dressed like this the entire movie. But of course, he got his special dragon scale armor for the finale, and although a little basic, it still looks functional and gets the job done. Though a part of me does kind of wish he fought that entire finale in jeans and sneakers. I don't think the Great Protector would have liked that. The Marvel logo continues to expand and grow with every passing movie, and it's been fun to check out all the tiny tweaks they add to it. I mean, I don't think the Marvel logo has nearly enough Hawkeye, but that's a conversation for a different day. Anyways, the Marvel logo for Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings now includes the all-women scene from Avengers Endgame, where Captain Marvel and the MCU's fiercest female fighters all gathered together to take on Thanos' forces. A worthy addition, I might add. This isn't that important to the Shang-Chi film, but I think it's worth a mention. Okay, now who do I talk to about them adding the scene where Professor Hulk gives Ant-Man a taco? That needs to be there. So I get that the Iron Gang in Shang-Chi wanted revenge, but did they really go about it the best way? They were mad at Wenwu for all he did with the 10 rings, so they came to his home to take his wife out of the picture permanently, and although it was successful, all it did was make Wenwu angry enough to get back into a life of crime and wipe out the members of the Iron Gang. Anyways, the Iron Gang is another comic reference, with it being one of the gangs that Fu Manchu, which was Shang-Chi's father in the comics, ran in the comics. I wonder how much things would be different if instead of a rival gang like in the movie, the gang that comes to eliminate Shang-Chi's mom once works for Wenwu. Do you think he would have been so guilty that he wouldn't have put back on the rings? In the film, the big question, thanks to the mid-credit scene, is where exactly did the rings come from? It's a plot point that's sure to be the main conflict of the inevitable sequel. The movie kept where Wenwu got the rings as a mystery at the beginning, and now we know why. Gotta set up that second movie. The explanation they did give us, though, is a fun callback to the comics. The movie says that some legends see Wenwu finding them in a cave, suggesting they've been on Earth forever. Others suggest he found them in a crater, which suggests alien origin. In the comics, the rings were actually made from materials from a downed spaceship that the Mandarin found and belonged to an ancient race of space dragons known as the McLuhans. Fingers crossed for Fin Fang Foom in the sequel. As you sat through the credits to see the end credits scenes, you might have noticed the film was dedicated to Brad Allen. If you were curious on who that was, Brad was actually the stunt coordinator for the film who tragically passed away in August of this year. It's a tragic loss. Allen was part of Jackie Chan's stunt coordinator team and really gave the film a special look with its amazing fight choreography. R.I.P. Brad. Whoever's responsible for the fight choreography for the next film has very large shoes to fill. Katie was one of the best sidekick characters in a Marvel movie that we've seen. Not only was she a perfect comic relief, but she had her own arc in terms of becoming her own hero. One funny detail about her is that when she's in a fight situation, she'll start singing Hotel California, as it will immediately disarm whoever's attacking her. And it worked too, but the song actually ties in with the movie pretty well. It's about entering a dangerous world and trying desperately to find a way out, but with no success. This parallels Shang-Chi's own journey as he tried to escape the dark and seedy world his father was grooming him for. The posters on Shang-Chi's wall in his garage apartment revealed some interesting things about our titular character, mainly that he has excellent movie taste. We see posters of Kung Fu Hustle, The Warriors, and The Godfather, and you have to wonder what Shang-Chi likes about these movies. Do you think he watches Kung Fu Hustle and thinks he can do better than them? And already, The Godfather is one of the greatest movies of all time, but do you think Shang-Chi watches that film, which at its core is about a towering father figure running a criminal empire, while his innocent son slowly gets dragged into the family business and gets a little uncomfortable? He's probably the only one who's sad that Michael Corleone becomes the new Godfather at the end of the movie for obvious reasons. Early on in the film, Katie's grandma mentions how the Day of the Dead is coming up and makes a joke about how a bottle of whiskey disappeared from her husband's grave. If you were like me, you thought the Day of the Dead would be a big factor in the plot, but nothing major came from it on a story level. But thematically, it connected to the entire movie. Katie's grandma's explanation of honoring those who had passed had an interesting parallel to Wenwu's journey, who found himself going down a dark path in order to rescue his deceased wife, who he believed was trapped in a dark realm in Ta Lo. Shang-Chi even throws it in Wenwu's face about how he isn't honoring his mom's memory by threatening to destroy everything. I think that's a fun thematic callback overall, don't you? When Shang-Chi is standing shirtless in the Golden Daggers Fight Club, I understand it might be hard to look at anything else. But if you look closely, you'll see the Madripoor flag hanging in the background. Madripoor is an island in Marvel Comics that a lot of villains like to hang out in thanks to its strict non-extradition laws. And we've already seen this place in Phase 4 of the MCU, as it was featured in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, where it gave us the iconic moment of Baron Zemo dancing. Can we go back there, please? It wouldn't be a Disney movie if there weren't some fun, adorable side creature that they could make toys out of. In this case, that means Morris, the Daijang that Trevor thought only he could see. But if you were curious about this creature, as well as all the other fantastical creatures in Shang-Chi, then you're in luck. These actually weren't just comic-based creatures, but they all exist in ancient Chinese mythology. Like, go and Google food dogs, and I think you'll immediately want one as a pet. Oh, is that just me? You're right, the food bill for one of those things would be enormous. Ta Lo opened up a whole new world for the MCU, and I think I mean that literally. Michelle Yeoh's Nan is one of the protectors of Ta Lo, and when she speaks to Shang-Chi about stopping Wenwu, she says things like, protecting your universe. That implies that Ta Lo isn't in our universe and exists separately in a different universe. In the comics, Ta Lo is a pocket dimension and exists outside our main universe. We've already seen other instances of this in the MCU with things like Doctor Strange's Dark Dimension and even the Quantum Realm. But the question is, how does Ta Lo exist within the big multiverse that the MCU is building up?
Hey kids, you see that new Marvel movie called The Eternals? Well, here's some things you might have missed. Maybe, I don't know you. Alright, let's start with that post-credits scene you should be kind of trained to wait for, like the good MCU lab rat that you are. This is the way of the human sphere, after all. In the final post-credits scene, we're shown Dane, totally not Jon Snow Whitman, opening up an old box to reveal a creepy sword. That sword is, of course, the Ebony Blade, which, if you read the comics, is the weapon used by the Black Knight, who, of course, is Dane Whitman's alter ego in said comics. Oh man, I'm way too... Oh my gosh, why is my head cut off? Gotta do this? Do I gotta do this? Oh boy. There we go, rookie mistake. You know, professionals actually have their monitor right above the camera so that they can see what they're doing, but not me. Not me. Earlier in the film, one of the Eternals... crap, I honestly, I don't remember... I don't remember which one it was. There's so many of them. Anyway, one of them, Immortal Scamps, picks up a sword in the domo late in the film and refers to it as the Ebony Blade, only for another one of our litany of heroes to, I guess, correct that to Excalibur, which is a common reference point in the comics for, again, the Ebony Blade, which also dates back to Arthurian legend. Now back to that post-credits Black Knight tease, you probably noticed that voice that asks whether Dane is ready for whatever tomfoolery he's about to get into. Lucky me, I wrote this script the night I saw the movie, and of course this part's all over the news now, so surprise, it's Mahershala Ali, who of course was cast ages ago as Blade. Gotta say, the fearsome vampire hunter getting his first sort of introduction in the Eternals was not on my bingo card.
Is your blood on fire?
Of course, maybe I shouldn't have been all that surprised. After all, this is also the first film in the MCU, as far as I can recall, that directly references vampires. It's a bit of a cheeky way, but Kingo does mention that his valet tried to kill him in the past because he thought the never-aging Bollywood superstar was some kind of vampire. Which I, by the way, would love to think is a reference to my first ever Bollywood experience, Band Darwaza, which I'm probably mispronouncing actually now I'm thinking about it. Anyway, those Ramsey brothers, they sure can direct a lean, mean vampire musical, I tell you what. Oh, one other thing about Dane and his, 10 minutes of screen time. That family crest you see on that there ring that Cersei gives to Mr. Whitman is the in-comics symbol adorning the Black Knight. Not sure how many ways I can say Dane is the Black Knight, and this is a reference to that, but here we are. Our other sexy stinger comes in the form of the introduction of Harry Styles as Star Fox, aka Eros. I wish I had some footage to show you there, but theatrical release, yada yada yada. In the comics, Star Fox... Help me! Damn it, Slippy, get off my back! In the comics, Eros is the brother of Thanos, whom he grew up with on the planet Titan. Eros, his sidekick, I guess, slash valet, slash horrifying CGI monstrosity, Pip the Troll, also shows up in that mid-credits scene. Pip is best known as a compatriot of Adam Warlock's, who of course was hinted at in the post-credits scene in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He also, thanks to a little magical plot junk, can teleport and has the ability to locate any individual, which of course makes sense of Star Fox's claim of being able to find the missing Eternals. He's voiced by Patton Oswalt, who of course was also previously attached to the MCU through his work on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where he played everyone's favorite clones, the Koenig brothers. And here's one you definitely missed if you pay zero attention to the credits. I know I was surprised to see his name after months of rumors that guest star... star of the guest? Dan Stevens would be the voice of the villainous deviant Crow. Welp, actually that role went to Pennywise himself, Bill Skarsgård. And Dan Stevens is nowhere to be seen in Eternals, which on the one hand, cool to hear Skarsgård, but on the other hand, man, I really wish I could tell him the final product. Now, lots of eagle-eyed viewers have pointed this out, but for those in the back, yes, Cersei actor Gemma Chan has been in the MCU before, and not all that long ago. She played the villainous Minerva in 2019's Captain Marvel. I guess since she was blue, they figured no one would, really care. Now, those in the know when it comes to the comic side of things shouldn't have been too surprised by Arishem being, well, a big old bad guy. Not only is he like obviously bad news, but in those comics he's also literally called the Killer of Planets. By the by, if you could hear past all the epic post-processing, you might have found the voice of Arishem to be somewhat familiar. The Celestial is voiced by David Kaye, who's lent his voice to a massive number of projects over the years. He's the voice of Clank in the Ratchet & Clank video game franchise, he's General Hawk in G.I. Joe, and he even voiced Jarvis in various Marvel TV projects like Avengers Assemble, where he also voiced my personal fave, Baron Zemo, and those weird Heroes United CGI movie things. That's all just the tip of the iceberg, of course, but the point being, dude's got a pedigree. And in the Ocean dub of Dragon Ball Z, he was Raccoon! And hey, if you thought Arishem's title in the old Eternals comic wasn't enough to judge him as, well, a super obvious antagonist, then Earth X is here to serve. This miniseries postulates that the potential for superhuman beings was implanted in the Earth by Celestials who wanted these superpowered dudes and dudettes to protect, you guessed it, the Celestial that Earth was impregnated with in the long, long ago, and which, once born, in this case, after feeding on our natural resources, would of course destroy the planet. Just, you know, lots of bad news from them Celestials, that's what I'm saying. They're not good guys. There's also a lot of references to Neil Gaiman's run on the Eternals, including Sprite's obsession with becoming an adult. In fact, in the comic run, Sprite winds up being a major antagonist, and once all is said and done, he straight up just gets his neck snapped by the Eternal Zurus. The idea of the Dreaming Celestial Tiamat is also a big part of this arc, so if you want to just get more, I guess, out of your love of this film, if you loved it, go read Neil Gaiman's Eternals run. I'm sorry I spoiled it for you. Whoops. Speaking of Sprite, we get a lot of references to historical figures who were in turn just Eternals the whole time or affected by Eternals in some way. In the credits, we get a few, including an image suggesting Sprite aided in Houdini's magic act. We also earlier get a great comparison between Sprite and Tinkerbell, the idea being that Tinkerbell can't be with Peter Pan, much like how Sprite can't be with Icarus. And this seems like a fairly obvious direct nod to the comics, wherein we find out that Sprite was the inspiration for Peter Pan. That was a drum roll, by the way. Another comic reference that's a bit more direct is the pose Icarus strikes after breaking free of his Phastos-created bonds during the final battle. The same pose and eye laser sexiness found on the cover of Eternals #6. You may also have noticed in the opening crawl a reference to the 6 singularities. If you didn't manage to put 2 and 2 together, I guess 3 and 3, whatever, they were a reference to the Infinity Stones.
There were 6 singularities.
Oh, and you know how Icarus flies into the sun at the end like some sort of superpowered dork who just got turned down for prom? Well, that was shoehorned into the movie because, hey, he's Icarus. He flew too close to the sun. They literally mention this in the movie. Because, you know, Greek mythology, baby. Come on. Now, Druig is an interesting change of sorts for the Eternals. Usually he's the one to betray or double-cross his teammates, but of course, this being an MCU movie, something like that just has to be turned on its head.
I wouldn't go in there for 20 minutes.
But that didn't stop the filmmakers from giving him a little villainous edge. This is another one that I doubt you missed it, but I kind of just wanted to talk about it. Wasn't it fascinating how he just kind of has a cult? Seriously, the group meets in a freaking church in the middle of a commune in which Druig has complete control over all those within, and he comes mighty close to forcing them to sacrifice their lives before sending them to the river to escape. Like, I'm shocked they weren't all just like drinking Flavor Aid or something. The Eternals are also linked heavily to Babylon in the comics, so it's no wonder they settle there for a bit in the film. Thena's romantic ties to Crow, something teased in the trailer, but of course unconsummated in the film, began in the Herod Factor, wherein the Eternals battled the Deviants over the city of Babylon. This was also the city ruled over by Gilgamesh, hence his place in mythology. It's also suggested in the film that, I guess Thanos was kinda right. It's explained that the Celestial needed the energy created by the full population of Earth, and if that population was cut in half, then the Dreaming Celestial wouldn't have been born, or at least, you know, not at this particular moment in time. Yet another point for the Thanos did nothing wrong camp.
You're not the only one cursed with knowledge.
In the trailer and the film, we also get the long-standing tradition of a glimpse at Cap's shield, in this case on board Kingo's private plane. I guess the dude's a fan of Cap and collects memorabilia. I wonder if he ever hung out with Coulson. Oh, and if you're not in the know when it comes to music, don't worry, neither am I, and I did have to look this one up in between haggling over Sammy Hagar tickets. After Kingo name drops the Korean band BTS at his studio, the next song we hear is, of course, Friends by BTS. The Domo, the ship used by the Eternals, is based somewhat on the comics, where Domo is actually, well, this guy. Domo's job is essentially to handle the affairs of other Eternals in Olympia, which is a real place and not a phony construct like in the film. He's essentially an invulnerable, undying secretary. Another minor comic book reference comes in the form of Thena's Madwiri, which is basically eternal Alzheimer's and is a pretty messed up, scary concept. The idea is that while the Eternals have immortal, borderline impervious to harm bodies, their minds are essentially just those of normal humans. As you can imagine, a few millennia can have a strong effect on one's mental well-being, as Cersei found out in Avengers number 361. This might just be me stretching for links to other properties, but did y'all notice that the way Sprite is communicating with ancient civilizations and creating myths and legends is a whole lot like how C-3PO tells stories to the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi? Just saying. There's also a character reading a Star Wars book at one point, and it is Disney, so like, I don't know, synergy?
Spider-Man No Way Home delivers loads of heroes, tons of villains, and of course, like any good Marvel movie, it's packed with Easter eggs and references spanning not just Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe, but 3 Sony movie universes as well. Oh, did you not know that already? Well, what are you doing here then? This video is obviously full of spoilers. Well, now that that's out of the way, here are the 25 Easter eggs and references I thought were cool as heck in Spider-Man No Way Home. The film hits us with a big reveal fairly early on, and one I was happy to see. About a week prior to the film's release, Kevin Feige said Charlie Cox would remain the MCU's Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil. But in true MCU fashion, he was vague about when, or even if, that would actually be. Well, the timing was obviously intentional, as we're treated to Charlie Cox's appearance as Murdock in Peter and Aunt May's apartment while he helps the gang out of some legal trouble. This is also hot on the heels of Vincent D'Onofrio's reappearance the same week on Disney Plus's Hawkeye series as Kingpin. Fans of Netflix's Daredevil got some good presents this holiday. Oh, and another rad thing here is that it's Jon Favreau's second time playing in a scene with Daredevil. Here, he's Happy Hogan, but he also played Foggy Nelson in the 2003 Ben Affleck Daredevil stinker. Speaking of Hawkeye, and I know this is a Spider-Man video, but we love the MCU for its connections, Yelena Belova mentions to Kate Bishop that while she's in New York, she'd like to visit the new and improved Statue of Liberty. The line is a bit strange since that Hawkeye episode aired literally one day prior to No Way Home's release, but after seeing No Way Home, it's pretty clear she was talking about the huge frickin' Captain America shield that's been added to it. Incidentally, since No Way Home takes place during the summer before Hawkeye, the statue has already been upgraded, partially destroyed, and then rebuilt in time for Yelena to go and see it. One other small but fun Hawkeye nod is that when Peter and MJ are swinging through Times Square, we see billboards for the totally accurate and not at all cringy Rogers the Musical, the very same Avengers-themed Broadway show that Clint Barton endures in the very first episode of Hawkeye. When Doctor Strange first meets the Ancient One in his first solo movie, he says he doesn't believe in souls or the astral dimension. So the Ancient One does what any abusive teacher would do and punches Strange's soul right out of his body. She later, or earlier, depending on how you look at it, uses the same trick on Bruce Banner, punching his soul out of the Hulk's body. It appears that, as usual, Strange was paying attention, as he employs this technique on Peter when he won't hand over the Machina de Cadavis magic spellbox. Why wizards don't just astral punch all their adversaries is a mystery to me, but when he uses it on Peter, it doesn't quite go as planned. Not only does Peter just, soul swim back to his body, but his body actively dodges Strange's attempts to reclaim the spellbox. My theory on that is that Peter's tingle, or spidey sense, is working reflexively. We've seen examples of a spidey sense detecting things Peter would have no way of seeing or hearing, so I guess not having a soul doesn't slow it down either. Speaking of Spidey's powers, while MJ and Peter are hiding out on the roof of their high school for some quiet time, MJ reads a tabloid article that suggests Spider-Man has the powers of hypnosis and has hypnotized MJ into joining his cult of personality. While we know Peter doesn't have that power, another spider person in the comics does. Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, can emit pheromones that make her victims fall in love with her. Fortunately for everyone else, she doesn't like using it because she considers it unethical and, as she mentions in one of her comic stories, releasing the pheromones kind of feels like going pee. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do it either. Set decorators love to hide things on sets, although for all we know it could have been director John Watts himself who planted these Easter eggs. While Peter and MJ are on their school roof, a graffiti tag that says G. Kane can be seen, likely a shout out to comics artist Jill Kane, who drew for Spider-Man at one point. Later, there's a tag on Aunt May's Feast truck that reads Ditko. The last name is Steve Ditko, comic artist and co-creator of Spider-Man, along with Stan Lee. Speaking of Stan Lee, a taxi is shown just before Doc Ock shows up with the license plate 1228, which is Stan Lee's birthday, December 28th. There's another license plate in this scene, but we'll get to that one a bit later. Now from graffiti tags to murals. When Peter Parker is speaking with his old teachers at Midtown High, he stands in front of a mural depicting some great folks from history, including Sir Isaac Newton, Marie Curie, Albert Einstein, and Mae C. Jemison, to name a few. Mae Jemison, in case you didn't know, was the first black woman in space, and additionally, the first real astronaut to appear on Star Trek, with a quick speaking part in a TNG episode from season 6. Okay, back to the MCU. Also appearing on the mural are MCU geniuses Howard Stark and Hank Pym. Wisely, their two portraits are separated by a window, as they famously did not get along. Tony Stark's incompetent grabby robot arm, Dummy, shows up in Happy's condo. Really not sure why anyone keeps this inept robot around. It's basically a Scudder from Red Dwarf. There's an old reference for you.
I wouldn't let them open a can of beans.
But seeing him in this film makes Dummy and Happy the longest running reoccurring characters in the MCU, since they both appear in Iron Man 1. They're like R2-D2 and C-3PO at this point. Anyway, maybe Happy keeps him around as a reminder of Tony. Aw, now I'm sad. Damage Control shows up again, but now they're a federal law enforcement agency that not only cleans up super people's messes, but also super people themselves, since in No Way Home they come down pretty hard on Peter and his pals. Their function has expanded since they first appeared in Spider-Man Homecoming, where they were shown hostilely taking over all the cleanup contracts after the Battle of New York, including the one held by Adrian Toomes, who would later become the Vulture. While under arrest by Damage Control, Peter tries to name-drop Nick Fury, but Agent Cleary tells Parker that Fury has been off-planet for the last year, which is unusually forthcoming. You'd think that would be classified, but oh well. It tracks with what we saw in the Far From Home post-credits, where Fury is very busy doing Skrull stuff in preparation for the Secret Invasion series that's coming to Disney+. I mentioned the Vulture a moment ago, and there's a clever little callback to his daughter, Liz Toomes, who Peter tried to date in Spider-Man Homecoming, but had to ghost because of the whole "your dad's a villain and wants to kill me" thing. I guess she's holding a grudge, because when Strange is chasing Peter, her picture can be seen on the cover of People magazine with the quote, "He's a liar. Let it go, girl. Your dad's a bird, your boyfriend was a spider. It was never gonna work." In the mid-credits scene in Spider-Man Far From Home, we got a brief look at the MCU's version of J. Jonah Jameson, and for this incarnation, he's an internet persona with his own website, thedailybugle.net. Well, No Way Home dives in even further, and has him mirroring real-life internet conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Jones is so out there that if you told me he was a comic book character and not a real person, I would have believed you. He's also been banned from almost every social media platform, so we're not going to give him any screen time here, but I will call out that Triple J tries to hawk his Daily Bugle supplements, the only other daily fix you need. And while it seems like a quirky little joke, it's a direct reference to Mr. Jones, who funds his platform by selling supplements with names like Alpha Power Vital Male Androgen Biosynthesis Promoter. That is not from a comic book, folks. Okay, moving on to the Spider-Men, who, to make things easier, get numbers in the film. Tom Holland's Spider-Man is Peter 1, Tobey Maguire's Spidey is Peter 2, and Andrew Garfield is Peter 3. While warming up for the big final fight, Peter 2 mentions his back is stiff, which calls back to a moment in Spider-Man 2 when Peter 2 hurts his back, which in turn is a reference to real life when a back injury reportedly almost cost Maguire his role in the first Spider-Man sequel.
My back! Oh, my back!
Sam Raimi, the director of Spider-Man 1, made the choice to have Peter 2's, this is getting weird, Peter 2's webbing be organic and come from his wrists. This is not unprecedented, as there are a few comics examples of Spider-Man that operate this way, but I always thought it was a weird choice. It's hard enough to believe that Spidey can stick to walls with his gloves and boots on, but mutating to have a spinneret in each wrist? I mean, spiders don't produce webs from their legs, you know. It comes out near their... Well, anyway, the other Peters are as confused as I am, but Peter 2 doesn't really want to talk much about it. Good for him. Let's move on. The Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme, using an image from the 60s Spider-Man cartoon, is sort of recreated in the high school science lab when Ned calls out for Peter's attention and all three Peters answer, and then point at each other. It's not bang on, but as we'll discuss later, it would seem that the writers are somewhat meme savvy at least, so we'll say it was an intentional reference. It's no secret that the Amazing Spider-Man films with Andrew Garfield weren't quite as beloved as the original Tobey trilogy. Well, at least the first two Tobey films. And in No Way Home, Garfield's Peter 3 is a little down on himself while preparing for the big fight. I think it's actually one of the most heartwarming scenes when Tobey's Peter 2 peps him up by telling him, well, you guessed it, that he's amazing. And honestly, I think Garfield was an amazing Spider-Man, it's just that his movies kinda sucked. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 tackles a story from the comics that no other film has taken on. Peter Parker's inability to save his girlfriend Gwen Stacy from dying. His grief is palpable when he tells Peter 1 about Gwen, and he's clearly reminded of Gwen when he sees Peter 1 and MJ interact in the high school lab. In the final battle, on the new and improved Statue of Liberty, MJ is thrown from the statue and a goblin bomb explodes. Peter 1 is unable to save her, so Peter 3 jumps to the rescue, and the scene plays out almost as it did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, complete with the same audio cues. But this time, instead of Peter 3 webbing Gwen and her head hitting the ground, he catches MJ and shoots a web upwards, stopping the fall and saving her. Peter 3 finally gets the redemption moment he never really had because he didn't get a third film. I take back what I said earlier. This is the most heartwarming moment in the film. After Max Dillon, aka Electro, is defeated, he sees Peter 3's face for the first time and comments that since Spider-Man was from Queens and helps a lot of poor people, that he always assumed Spider-Man would be black. He then posits there must be a black Spider-Man somewhere. Well, we all know Miles Morales exists somewhere, and it's both black and Latinx. Spider-Man Homecoming showed us Danny Glover as Aaron Davis, the uncle of Miles, although in the film there was no official mention of Miles' existence. I guess we'll have to wait a little bit longer for that one. Let's talk villains. Moments before Dr. Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock, first appears on the bridge, we can see a license plate on the MIT Assistant Vice Chancellor's car that reads 63ASM3, which can only mean Amazing Spider-Man number 3 from 1963, the very first appearance of Dr. Octopus in the comics. It's a cool little nod, but imagine if your license plate dictated which supervillain would appear to destroy you. I'm telling you the honest truth when I say a friend of mine once, as a joke, customized his car's license plate to say Lou Bega. And now I'm trying to imagine what that battle would have looked like. Speaking of Dr. Octopus, Otto may be a scientific genius, but he's not so creative when it comes to metaphors, since he's still on about his fusion reactor from Spider-Man 2, referring to it again as the power of the sun in the palm of his hand. When he sees one of Tony Stark's miniaturized arc reactors, he says exactly the same thing, suggesting that maybe English Lit was pushed aside for his engineering studies. The Amazing Spider-Man 2's Electro was very, blue. A design choice some fans were unhappy with. In the comics, Electro is a human wearing a green suit with yellow lightning bolts and honestly a quite goofy lightning bolt mask that kinda looks like a star. It's not uncommon for films to alter costumes for the big screen so they don't look quite so, well, comical. But Smurf Electro was a big change, and it's nice to see not only Electro with a more grounded costume, but there is also a little tip of the hat to his classic comic mask. When Dr. Kirk Connors, aka the Lizard, is locked up in Strange's basement, Ned calls him a dinosaur more than once. At first I thought it was just a cute gag, but I caught a line from The Amazing Spider-Man when Police Captain George Stacy is talking on the phone to the mayor, and he says, well, I'll let you hear it.
I can assure you if there was a giant dinosaur running around the streets of Manhattan, you would be the first to know.
In the high school lab, Ned asks Peter 2 if he has a best friend. Peter 2 says he did, meaning Harry Osborn, but that Harry tried to kill him and then died in his arms. Ned is seriously distraught by this and later promises Peter 1 that he won't turn into a supervillain and try to kill him. This kind of digs into something that happens in the comics version of Ned Leeds, who sort of becomes the Hobgoblin, but was actually brainwashed and wasn't actually the Hobgoblin in the end. I really can't see this kind of thing happening to MCU Ned, but I'm ready to eat my words in a few years since there is a collection of ceremonial-looking weapons on the wall in his house, as well as some green and gold fabric shown on a sewing machine. Who knows? But I will say that Comics Ned is a totally different guy than MCU Ned. Okay, from not quite Hobgoblin to the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn gets some really good moments in this film. After battling Peter 1 on the bridge, we later see Norman ditching his mask in a dumpster in a way that honors an iconic panel from Spider-Man number 50 when Peter decides to give up being Spider-Man and ditches the Spidey suit in the same way. It's a great homage, but honestly, I'm just happy the film decided to rid the Green Goblin of his mask. I always thought it was a major misstep in the original Spider-Man films to hide Willem Dafoe's performance under a mask while he was the Goblin, and No Way Home proves me right, as Dafoe delivers some amazing performances as the unmasked Goblin. I mentioned earlier that I have to believe the writers of No Way Home know their memes, and they come through with the one line I was actually dying to hear but didn't think that I would. While locked in Doctor Strange's basement, Norman Osborn offers to help the gang cure the other villains by stating that he's something of a scientist himself. This line is taken from the first Spider-Man when Norman Osborn first meets Peter 2 and is often used to meme on someone when they are totally not a scientist.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
At the end of the film, when the universe is falling apart at the seams, just before Doctor Strange casts his final spell, there are indistinct blue glowy beings that appear to be just waiting to enter the MCU and come after Spider-Man. I took a pretty close look, and most are actually just blobs, but there is one very distinct silhouette of a person with a spear, and you gotta believe that's Kraven the Hunter, a longtime Spidey adversary who's getting his own film in 2023, starring Aaron Taylor Johnson. That's a Sony film, though, in the same universe as Venom and the upcoming Morbius, so don't expect to see Kraven in the MCU anytime soon. Another silhouette looks like it has has a large tail and is probably a nod to some version of the Scorpion. Spider-Man Homecoming does introduce a version of Mac Gargan, the best-known Scorpion, but aside from a tattoo on his neck, this character hasn't really gone anywhere. Sometimes a tease is really just a tease. Not sure about you, but I was kinda waiting all movie for Eddie Brock and Venom to show up. True to the wacky style of the Venom films, what we got was just kinda weird. In a post-credit scene from Venom 2, Eddie and Venom are taking a break in Mexico, and just as Venom is about to show Eddie some cosmic wonders, they're transported to the MCU. It isn't explained then how this happens, but we now know that this was Doctor Strange's botched forgetting spell. In the No Way Home mid-credit scene, we see that Eddie and Venom just stayed in Mexico for the events of the film, and honestly, can you blame them? Looking back on the film now, adding these two characters would have probably pushed the film over from balancing a lot of spinning plates to an all-out train wreck. So it's probably for the best. However, the writers did leave the Venom possibilities wide open, because Venom leaves a little blobette of himself behind in the MCU when he and Eddie return to their own Sonyverse. Well, they did it. They pulled it off. Never did I think I would see a movie event quite like this. The licensing agreements between Marvel, Disney, and Sony made it seem like we'd never even see Spider-Man in the MCU, much less 3 Spider-Mans. Spider-Mans, all at once. Not only that, seeing Maguire and Garfield in this film has actually renewed my fondness for their versions of Peter Parker. And I'm not the only one, because at the time of making this video, fans online are calling for an Amazing Spider-Man 3 for Andrew Garfield, which, hey, I'm not going to make predictions anymore because I guess almost anything can happen now. So those are the Easter eggs and references I thought were cool in Spider-Man No Way Home, and yes, there are others I didn't touch on, like comparisons to the One More Day and One Moment in Time story arcs in the comics, but those require so much backstory I didn't want to get into it here. But I urge you to look up a plot synopsis or hey, even read those stories if you're interested. Oh, and ever since WandaVision, I'm not even going to entertain any more Mephisto theories until we're shown something way more solid.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
And with great power, there must also come great responsibility.
Spider-Man No Way Home delivered in ways we couldn't even begin to imagine, even with huge amounts of hype and expectation. This movie blew up the internet when it was first announced, so it was no surprise to anybody that it shattered box office records for 2021. It made me laugh, it made me cry, by golly, it got me excited. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's Spider-Man's threequel, if you will, is loaded to the brim with Easter eggs and references to other films and adventures of the comic book world. These hidden details not only encourage repeat viewing, but also makes the movie even more special for casual and hardcore fans alike. It has become practically a game at this point to find a scene without a reference or an Easter egg. If for some weird reason you haven't seen the film yet, go see the movie. Here is your mandatory spoiler warning. If you love Easter eggs and you love Spider-Man, this is the video for you. I'm something of an Easter egg hunter myself. Speaking of, Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn and Green Goblin is highly regarded as the best villain in not only the Sam Raimi trilogy of Spider-Mans, but also in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. The character has resurfaced on the internet in recent years for completely unrelated reasons. Lovers of memes and internet culture have immediately recognized that the famous meme of Norman Osborn saying the line, "I'm something of a scientist myself,"
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz. You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
in the 2002 Spider-Man movie was referenced in Spider-Man No Way Home when Norman Osborn said the same line to Peter Parker in Doctor Strange's basement.
I can help you.
You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
There is a scene where Peter Parker is pushing through a crowd of protesters, that's a lot of P's, which is very similar to a scene in Amazing Spider-Man's number 68's Crisis on Campus, by the way. Someone holds up a sign that reads "Devil in Disguise." This is possibly a reference to Peter Parker's lawyer, Matt Murdock, who is Daredevil in disguise. This could also be a reference to Mephisto, an actual devil in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the complicated comic book storyline of One More Day, Mephisto offered Spider-Man a deal to undo his marriage in order to save the life of Aunt May. This particular storyline was a triggering event that ended up with Doctor Strange pulling his best Chris Angel trick, undoing the fact that Peter Parker was publicly revealed as Spider-Man. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? Matt Murdock's Daredevil appearance in No Way Home shouldn't really shock anyone, considering it's terribly common for Marvel movies and series to have crossover appearances more often than not.
Hello, Peter.
As the dude says, it really ties the room together. But to my surprise, Matt Murdock giving legal advice to my young web-slinging friend actually goes deeper than we initially thought. Matt Murdock actually defended Peter Parker in court in the comic book. In The Amazing Spider-Man issue 219, our pal Peter breaks into Rikers Island and gets arrested and calls upon Murdock to keep him out of jail. What did you think was going to happen? Good lord, you broke into a maximum security prison for Peter Parker's sake. This is a real blink and you'll miss it moment, so pay attention, kids. Moviegoers might have noticed a familiar face on a magazine cover on a newsstand. The face in question belongs to Liz Toombs, who was Peter Parker's love interest in Spider-Man Homecoming, as well as Michael Keaton's Vulture's daughter. It seems Liz appears to be calling Peter a liar on the cover of the magazine, which is clear she's still bitter from when Peter left her hanging all those times in Homecoming. Considering Liz found out that Peter is the reason her dad is in a bit of a legal pickle, it's not surprising to find out she isn't Peter Parker's biggest supporter. This one made me chuckle. Aunt May walks into Peter's room and he's standing next to MJ in his boxers because he just stripped off his Spider-Man suit and it's pretty awkward. Although the noises coming from the bedroom suggest something more inappropriate, it is pretty harmless. This moment is a callback to when Aunt May walks in on Ned and a near-nude Peter Parker just after Ned discovers that Peter is Spider-Man. Peter quickly dresses and closes all the blinds, and it seems very appropriate that this scene takes place after the whole world discovered Peter's secret hobby. When Doctor Strange came into frame with a gray hoodie underneath his cape and a mug that says, "Oh for fuck's sake" on it, many fans dismissed it and did not think anything of it, chalking it up to Marvel's quirky sense of humor. This was until the hardcore fans started digging into the hidden text and imagery on Doctor Strange's hoodie, and it turns out to be deeper than we thought. It turns out to be a Columbia University hoodie, and this makes complete sense for Doctor Strange to wear it. It was established in the comics that Stephen Strange graduated from this Ivy League school. Ah, this movie runs deep.
Go get him, Tiger.
Go get him, Tiger. Or should I say, Spider?
When our favorite web slinger and MJ are lying on the roof of the school reading a wonderfully reliable tabloid magazine, speculating on Spider-Man's abilities and crimes, there is a piece of graffiti that reads Ditko behind them. This is a reference to the name of the artist Steve Ditko. He was the co-creator of both Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, who also co-stars in the movie. He also co-created the Green Goblin, Sandman, Electro, Doc Ock, and the Lizard. He has a unique design for villains, so unique in fact that it inspired countless other characters, and no other creator in the Spider-Man world has come close to his level. His inclusion in the movie just feels so right. This one is a wonderful reference to Tony Stark and his technology. The robotic arm that is in Happy's condo is actually Dumb E, which is one half of Tony Stark's helper arms, the other one being you. Not you, but you. You get what I mean. They appeared in the Iron Man trilogy and in Spider-Man Homecoming, so their appearance in No Way Home makes total sense. Murdock mentions to Happy that he should get a lawyer due to the missing technology the feds are looking for, and it's hysterical to watch Happy react to learning that he may be in trouble for having the technology. During the climax of the film, spoiler, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man saved MJ from falling to her death, and he seemed to have responded way more emotionally than MJ herself. This scene potentially could have confused very casual fans as to why this scene merited so much emotions from Andrew Garfield. This entire section of the scene was a clear reference to Gwen Stacy's tragic death, spoiler, in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. MJ falling off the Statue of Liberty's scaffolding is a damn near frame-by-frame reshoot of Gwen Stacy's fall, except, luckily for MJ, Spider-Man actually manages to save the person falling this time. Boy, knowing this now actually makes both scenes even more sad. Is anybody crying? Poor Peter, you did the best you could, pal. Back to those very reliable tabloid articles that the Love Bunch is rating on the roof, it suggests that Spider-Man even has Spider-Minions. But boy, the writer of these tabloid articles had no idea how accurate he or she was. There was a period of time in the comic books where Spider-Man and Doc Ock switched brains before Otto killed Peter in his former body. Sounds complicated, let me explain. After many hard-fought battles, Doc Ock's body started to fail and decay itself. So in one last attempt to survive, Otto swapped consciousness with Spider-Man, leaving Spider-Man weak and dying in his fragile new body. However, residual memories caused Otto to understand the responsibility of being a hero. Let me move forward. This meant that Doc Ock got to experience the beauty of life as both Peter Parker and Spider-Man with no one to stop him. Let's dig a little deeper. He dubbed himself the Superior Spider-Man, which was the new title of the comic book. Doc then set out to be the hero in the most evil way possible. One of the first things he did was hire some henchmen that he dubbed his Spider Minions. He had his own personal army in his war against crime to form his own legacy as a legendary evil crime fighter. It sounds so cute, but it's just so evil. A digital backup of Otto's mind survived, and using cloning technology, he was able to transfer his mind to a new body with his and Spider-Man's genes. Good lord! Therefore, becoming the superior octopus while working for Hydra. Along with his spider minions, he then moved to San Francisco and resumed his activities as the superior Spider-Man and octopus. But regardless of how much good he did, Otto was forced to make a deal with Mephisto to return to his normal body in order to defeat another mastermind. Boy, that really went deeper than I thought. I'm sorry for trailing. This entry is a very small detail that I am just in love with. After Peter's secret life is revealed and Stark Industries are under investigation, Happy is shown on TV being related to the legal troubles. But rather than using a recent photo, the photo they use of him is from 1999, where he's rocking some long hair and a bolo tie. This look was served in Iron Man 3 during the New Year's Eve party prelude in Switzerland. On top of that, next to the TV is a pile of hung-up security badges. This is another reference to Iron Man 3 when Happy got the job as the head of security and badgered everyone to wear their security badges. The man even put flyers in the bathroom. You can't even take a pee in peace without being micromanaged. Saying Marvel movies love to slide in small details that mean so much is an understatement.
We have a new world to conquer.
During the bridge sequence, we can see the MIT's Vice Chancellor's car. What the hell's a Vice Chancellor anyways? The license plate is shown. Now, we all know this can't just be a random compilation of numbers. No, it never is in Marvel movies. Even the food they eat is somehow a reference. Good lord. Anywho, the license plate says 63 ASM3, which is a reference to Doc Ock's first ever appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man number 3 in 1963. Good lord, how did anybody find this one? In the very beginning of the movie, as Spider-Man attempts to swing away from the attention he's getting from the citizens of New York City, advertisements can be seen in the background for a Broadway show, Rogers the Musical. To the casual fan, you may only see a silhouette of Captain America and his signature shield, but it goes a bit deeper. This advertisement was first introduced and depicted in Hawkeye. Although no more details about this Broadway show has come out in No Way Home, fans were very happy to see even the smallest details continue to pop up in stories in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Jumping back to our favorite tabloid magazine that is often featured in Spider-Man movies, one of the articles that MJ is reading suggests that a web-slinging boy has powers of seduction. Enough that even she may fall for the spell. Spiders aren't exactly known for their seduction powers, and Peter is no different. Just watch the boxer scene in his bedroom, and you can see how awkward the boy is. Little did we know, the article really isn't that far off. In the comic books, it's not Spider-Man who has seduction powers, it's actually Spider-Woman. It wasn't a proud moment for feminism in the 1970s comic, but Spider-Woman used her seduction powers both in her early role as a Hydra villain and eventually as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Back to a pure and wholesome entry to end us off, a Spider-Man movie wouldn't be the same without a Stan Lee reference, who is the creator of Spider-Man and many, many more. Back to the bridge sequence, one of the taxis on the George Washington Bridge has the number 1228 on the car. This is shorthand for December 28th, which, if you don't know, is Stan Lee's birthday. Wow, so wholesome.
Hey, you're not a nobody. You're somebody.
You're never a nobody, man. Yes, I was.
Alright, we got a very special bonus entry for you because you behaved so well. You should be very proud of yourself. In Spider-Man No Way Home, we meet Zendaya's wonderful performance of Michelle Jones, which is later nicknamed MJ in the film's finale. Some hardcore fans speculated that she was based on the character of Michelle Gonzalez from the comics, a roommate of Peter, and they had an on-again, off-again relationship. That sounds pretty complicated. Fans thought that MJ's nickname was just a throwaway joke for the fans. We didn't really know how seriously we should take the MJ nickname because we knew this wasn't the Mary Jane Watson we all know and love, which is Spider-Man's longtime crush, neighbor, girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, wife, ex-wife, etc. The list goes on and on. In Spider-Man Far From Home, we uncovered some of the deeper elements of Zendaya's character that gave us hints to her backstory from the comics. It soon became clear to us that MJ was not a throwaway joke, and that Marvel was attempting to present Michelle Jones as the new definitive look at the MJ character. This point was further proven in Spider-Man No Way Home when we discovered her last name isn't actually Jones. Her full name is Michelle Jones Watson, or MJ Watson if you will. It all makes sense now. Spider-Man No Way Home has certainly captured our hearts and brought us on the web-slinging ride of our lives. Easily the most popular superhero movie, maybe even ever. We were glad to see the movie was loaded with Easter eggs and references, from small details you would never even notice to large and in-your-face cameos. The Marvel Cinematic Universe never seems to disappoint. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go put on an airtight rubber suit and practice my fighting moves.
Power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Hey kids, another blockbuster Marvel movie has made it to the theater screens. That means we gotta talk about all the things that you missed. Maybe, I don't know you, maybe you didn't, but maybe you did. Here's a video. Out of context spoilers. So, let's just start with the moment where I went, holy butts, this movie is amazing. No, it wasn't the complete decimation of the Illuminati, something that was, admittedly, weirdly therapeutic to watch. It was the sheer raininess of the whole film, specifically the moment where I realized exactly what Doctor Strange was going to do with his deceased alternate universe self. That's right, Deadite Doctor Strange, baby. The character people assumed would be the true villain of the film was, in fact, our lead in a decaying skin suit. Amazing. For those not in the horror movie know, director Sam Raimi also directed the Evil Dead trilogy, a series predicated on a demonic Book of the Dead, in that case the flesh-bound Necronomicon, which when used brings about demonic possession of those who dared tamper with it. Sound familiar? Yeah, if this was and actually come to think of it also, it's based around H.P. Lovecraft nonsense. H.P. Lovecraft created Cthulhu, who's the demon in the comics, who is in turn the creator of the Darkhold, Cthon, who also looks like Cthulhu. We'll get into that in a second. Anyway, yeah, if this was a comic book, it'd be called Doctor Strange versus the Evil Dead, which, by the way, where's my tie-in, Marvel? Come on, do your job! I don't actually have time to go to a comic book store. They might have done it. I have no idea. If you didn't stay for the mid-credits scene, well, shame. But also, you missed a pretty huge cameo. Furiosa herself, Charlize Theron, showed up as Clea, the Sorcerer Supreme of the Dark Dimension, and in the comics, eventually the wife of Doctor Strange. Looks like the two of them are gonna have to team up to figure out all this multiversal madness started by, Sylvie, the female version of Loki in the series Loki. Admittedly, Clea is not an alternate version of Strange himself, but still, there is a bit of a comparison to be made, so pretty interesting correlation right in there. Other big $2 words. This is going horribly. But what exactly is Clea coming to Strange for? Well, considering she immediately cut open a portal to the Dark Dimension after mentioning an incursion, I'm gonna go with that. The incursion, as we saw, is something that happens when two universes smash into each other with Earth as the central point of impact. This is inferred to be the cause of the catastrophic conditions of the last universe visited by Strange and Christine. Now, based on all the multiverse-based tomfoolery currently occurring in every other Marvel Phase 4 production, it seems like we're heading into a big Avengers-style event film based on some truly catastrophic universe tampering. So, expect a return to the incursion concept sooner rather than later. But hey, where's my money at for where this whole franchise is going? Gotta be Secret Wars. That's also where everybody else's money is at. It's not a new concept, but still, I mean, that's the reason we're all saying it's gonna be Secret Wars, because it seems like it's gonna be Secret Wars. In the comics, there are two major versions of this event. The 1984 version, aka the biggest toy commercial in comics history, featured the villainous Beyonder kidnapping a bunch of heroes and villains, placing them on a planet called Battle World, and having them fight it out. Eventually this turns into an everyone against Dr. Doom story, as is often the case when you bring in Dr. Freakin' Doom. Secret Wars was super popular and amongst other things gave Spidey his initial black symbiote suit. Secret Wars 2 and 3 followed shortly after, mostly just expounding on the Beyonder and his origin. But the Secret Wars of 2015, yeah, that's the one that we want. You know, basically the whole idea is that the multiverse collapses and Dr. Doom becomes a god in his own, like, kind of sort of pocket dimension, and then there's these multiversal life rafts with all these heroes and villains that come by, and then there's all these other heroes and villains that don't remember who they are, and blah, 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 blah. Battle world, people fight, the multiverse is recreated, and what happened afterward was kind of disappointing, but point is, it's a whole other battle world, and it's pretty rad. Some fans have had questions about where exactly Wanda's children came from, and that's a mystery that the film explains. Since Thanos is defeated pre-snap, their ages aren't an issue because she's of course had more time to have and raise children. Additionally, the whole reason she's able to create the same children that exist in the alternate universes is that she dreamed them. We learn in Multiverse of Madness that our dreams are glimpses into alternate realities, from which she pulled the look and personalities of her kids. Pretty simple. Where's Vision, or, you know, whoever the father is in those universes? Yeah.
Where were you hiding all these kids up till now?
What?
By the by, I'm not sure how intentional this was, but the acronym for Multiverse of Madness spells out MOM. Considering this is a film partially about motherhood and the connection between a mom and her kids, pretty cool, coincidence or not. Doctor Strange, in the MOM. Ugh. In the first Doctor Strange, Mordo mentions the Living Tribunal. If you look closely during Doctor Strange and America Chavez's initial trip through the various universes, we do get a brief glimpse at that comic book character. Whether or not this is just an Easter egg, of course, remains to be seen, but in the comics, he's basically the judge of all realities and is in charge of keeping the multiverse nice and tidy. Comic book spoilers. In New Avengers number 30, shortly before the Time Runs Out arc and Secret Wars, the Living Tribunal was killed, and his body was left on the moon. Kind of like a more savage version of what Goku does to Monster Carrot in Dragon Ball. Another quick blink and you'll miss it universe that would have been really cool to visit is the Savage Land, which is basically just a prehistoric world. In the comics, this is a physical location located in Antarctica, but it would seem, based on this brief glimpse, that it's in a universe all its own, perhaps an entire Earth where dinosaurs never went extinct. So I guess that's one big negative for Doctor Strange in the MOM. No Doctor Strange fighting dinos. Shame, shame. If you're a fan of Sam Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy, you no doubt recognized this 1973 Oldsmobile Delta 88 Royale floating around in the messed up final reality Strange and Christine visit. This car appears in every Sam Raimi film and is notably Ash's car in the Evil Dead trilogy. It's also the car Uncle Ben drives in Spider-Man, and Bruce Campbell has stated that it even shows up in a disassembled version in his western The Quick and the Dead. The same fans who noticed that Easter egg definitely got what Raimi was going for with Bruce Campbell's phenomenal cameo as Pizza Papa. After he gets belligerent over America not paying for his balls, Strange steps in and magics Pizza Papa into hitting himself for 3 straight weeks. Any other rando Strange did that too. It might seem out of character, kind of a dick move on Doctor Strange's part, but I'd like to think that old Doc Strange just really loves the Evil Dead movies, seeing as this is one of Bruce Campbell's most famous bits, specifically from Evil Dead 2.
It helps maintain the illusion.
We even get a classic Raimi ending. Evil Dead famously ends with Ash being attacked and presumably possessed by a demonic force. Evil Dead 2 ends with him trapped in medieval times, and the alternate ending for Army of Darkness has him trapped in a desolate post-apocalypse. That's not even digging into the relatively predictable ending in Drag Me to Hell, which I won't spoil, but the title. So when Strange is walking along and gets the old forehead pain followed by a horrifying third eye reveal, it very much feels in tune with Raimi's style. But that's not all. Even the mid-credits scene, in which he's all hunky-dory moments later, jives with the Raimi touch, as in Evil Dead 2, where it turns out Ash makes it out of his predicament just fine. Well, minus a hand, and scarred for life, and trapped in a medieval world for a period of time, and he loses the love of his life forever. But you know, mostly fine. The Raimi touches keep on coming though. For example, when America Chavez and Doctor Strange are just kind of falling through the universes, you can see a taxi cab sporting a Grindhouse Releasing logo. This one's a bit more of a deep cut. A little background. My passions lie mostly in film preservation and physical media, and Grindhouse Releasing is an amazing company that restores and releases cult films theatrically and in pretty rad Blu-ray editions. The company is owned by Multiverse of Madness editor Bob Murawski, who also edited Army of Darkness, Spider-Man 1 and 2, and Drag Me to Hell, amongst others. Grindhouse Releasing also handles theatrical distribution for the original Evil Dead. Point is, Raimi has a strong connection to the company, and it's just really cool to see them get the Easter egg treatment. Oh, and as long as I'm on my soapbox, this new Death Game Blu-ray, so good. Not for everybody, but I really enjoyed it. It's what that Keanu Reeves movie with Eli Roth, Knock Knock, is based on, and it's a really good little gem from the 70s, so check that out. Oh, and this might be a bit of a stretch, but when Wanda is chasing Strange and company through the tunnels under the Illuminati base, that does seem like a direct nod to Zombie Wanda in What If. While none of the What If characters appear in the film, between this and Captain Carter, there does appear to be some references that Marvel couldn't help but pop in. Or it's just me stereotyping crazy witches with a preference for the color red. I don't know. This shot in Evil Dead is also referenced by Wanda when she enters a mirror as if it's water, mostly because, it is water. One of the more rad yet simplistic practical effects in 2 Sam Raimi movies, and in this case, part of a truly horrifying sequence that might be one of the absolute top scenes in all of Marvel history for me. I love that scene. Of course, in addition to all the obvious cameos like John Krasinski's long in-demand casting as a bowl of spaghetti, there's Professor X showing up, played by Patrick Stewart, and that toaster he was riding in was a somewhat clunky version of the hover chair he uses in the 90s X-Men cartoon, which is itself getting a Disney Plus continuation in 2023. If you didn't immediately make the connection, this entrance is also accompanied by Danny Elfman's interpretation of that show's Earworm theme song. Presumably, this is all just to get people really pumped for that X-Men series, which does include a lot of the original voice cast coming back, so pretty rad. Now, Patrick Stewart is one of 2 Star Trek captains up on that obnoxious Illuminati stage, by the way. Black Bolt is portrayed by Anson Mount, the same actor who played the character in that Inhuman show we all forgot the same day it premiered. He's also Captain Pike in Star Trek Strange New Worlds, itself a spin-off from his appearance in Star Trek Discovery. Considering he was Captain Kirk's predecessor, he's also canonically the oldest captain in the scene, so that's pretty dope. Now, one of my theories as to how Wanda will come back is that she'll be saved from death by a resident of Mount Wundagore. This is because in the comics, Mount Wundagore, in addition to just being really fun to say, is a pretty major component of various characters' backstories, Wanda included. It's also the place where Cthon wrote the Darkhold, which is of course analogous to him carving it out atop the mountain. The most notable resident of Mount Wundagore is the High Evolutionary, who is essentially Marvel's version of Dr. Moreau. And his, you see, look, that's 1-to-1. You know, is it Marlon Brando or is it a giant machine man? I can't tell. And his cow-woman hybrid Bova is the person who delivers babies, Wanda and Pietro, within the High Evolutionary's home. It could be that the MCU version of the High Evolutionary rescues Wanda and takes her to a nearby town or base, and maybe, just maybe, that's where we'll get our version of Magneto. Or not, probably not. I'm just paid to make up nonsense sometimes. Either which way, the High Evolutionary is rumored to be a character in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, meaning my guess is probably meaningless, and Mount Wundagore isn't nearly as important as I think it is. This is all pointless. I'm terrible at my job. One easier reference to spot, Earth 616 is the name given to the MCU's primary universe by Earth 838's Christine. Now, this has caused a bit of a kerfuffle amongst some sticklers in the fan base, since the official designation for the MCU is Earth 19999. But here's the thing. 1, that's a mouthful and sounds dumb out loud. 2, it's a reference for fans. And 3, Christine is an alternate universe character, meaning that she could just be using an alternate name meant to apply to how Earth 838 designates the MCU's world. And 4, it doesn't matter. That said, good on Mysterio for guessing the name of the MCU's multiversal designation.
This is Earth, Dimension 616. I'm from Earth 833.
Now back to Mount Wundagore for a sec. Those minions who Wanda gets as built-in servants at her new summer home are reminiscent of how the evil god Cthon is presented in the comics, basically just really beefy Cthulhus. Now, one reference seemingly tailor-made for Miles Teller if John Krasinski didn't work out is when Reed Richards is referred to as being a part of the Baxter Foundation. In the comics, the Fantastic Four work out of the Baxter Building, and the only use of the term Baxter Foundation was in that ill-fated 2015 reboot of Fantastic Four. Oh, and remember when Patrick Stewart is walking through that white void and you were like, "Aw, snap, he gonna battle with Wanda," and then that led to, "Ah, snap, he got his neck snapped, oh my god." Well, if you were paying close attention, you might have noticed WandaVision playing on the TV. We also get at least one musical cue from that show. And one of my favorite references, aside from the Grindhouse releasing one, which by the way, The Swimmer, excellent release, mind-blowing film, definitely worth the pickup. Is Wanda's children watching Oswald the Lucky Rabbit playing on TV. Oswald was basically the precursor to Mickey Mouse, created when Walt Disney's animation studio was still growing, and was eventually taken over completely by Universal after Disney and his staff, including animation god of iWorks, went off to do their own thing and created the eerily similar but far more successful Mickey Mouse. Ew, history, gross. Say, remember in the House of Midlife Crisis Goatee Strange when Christine uses that rad cannon thing to blast away some demons? That's the Brazier of Bom Goliath. Brazier? I feel like there's a different way to say that. Whatever. The Brazier of Bom Goliath. Keep that bust in shape, girls. Which was used in the comics to enhance a spell so that then new Thor, Eric Masterson, could sneak through Mephisto's realm undetected and give him a good butt pounding. Huh. It also shows up briefly for a gag during Strange's fight with Caecilius in the 2016 film. That's a dumb way to say it. In the 2016 film Doctor Strange. I don't know why I wrote it like that. Just the 2016 film. You know, the film from 2016. Come on.
You don't know how to use that, do you?
Some folks, nay a lot of folks, had some questions at the end of No Way Home, specifically as to how Strange's final spell works. While having a bit of post-giant eyeball creature lunch with America Chavez and Wong, Strange tries to explain how he already saved the multiverse with Spider-Man to America, who is quick to ask the most important question: does he shoot webbing out of his butt? Anyway, this scene is a great, quick and easy explanation of what happened. Strange says he doesn't think so regarding the butt webbing, telling us, the audience, that he knows Spider-Man, remembers the primary events of No Way Home, but does not remember Peter Parker. Tasty yum-yum narrative shorthand. And finally, this is kind of another dumb one, but the finale of Multiverse of Madness features Wanda pulling the old disappear under rubble routine, allowing us a theoretically dramatic ending while leaving the door open for future appearances. For me, it was one of the downsides of the movie. It's a little anticlimactic. But anyway, of course, we all know that Wanda will be back for a redemption arc at some point, but the scene from his own filmography Sam Raimi clearly rips off doesn't have the same open-endedness, specifically that of Doc Ock's death in Spider-Man 2, in which he pulls that whole pier thing down on himself to save the world, or at least New York, and dies drowning. And yet somehow, you know what? Dude still came back. Good for him.
Rip off your arms and shove them up your butt!
Thor Love and Thunder is out, and boy was it a fun ride. Jam-packed with Guns N' Roses songs, funny bits, a rekindling love relationship, and an epic battle to tie the room together. It made us laugh out loud, it made us tear up, it kept us on the edge of our seats. Heavy spoilers ahead, so please, for the love of God of Thunder, you have been warned. Every Marvel movie is absolutely peanut butter and jam-packed with Easter eggs and references, and Thor Love and Thunder is no different. Thor Love and Thunder took everything that worked with Ragnarok and dials it up to 11, and we believe it handles continuity more effectively than previous installments. They brought back Natalie Portman's Jane Foster as the mighty Thor in an arc lifted directly from Jason Aaron's comic book run. But this time, Jane Foster is no damsel in distress. She is now transformed into a hero in her own right, bringing a rainbow of joy in the MCU and leaving Thor Odinson bewildered as old feelings are reignited. Thor Love and Thunder brings a classic comic book adventure to life, and it's filled to the brim with Easter eggs and references. Let's take a deep dive and take a look at 25 things you might have missed in Thor Love and Thunder. I'm Joey C. Let's go!
Is he asleep?
No. I'm pretty sure he's dead.
Christian Bale plays a terrifying take of Gore the God Butcher, and he serves as Thor Love and Thunder's main villain. He is a tortured soul who resents the fact that the gods did not intervene to save the life of his daughter. Love and Thunder adapts Gore's origin story from Jason Aaron's Thor God of Thunder #6 comic book. Although he narrows the focus down solely to the relationship between Gore and his dying daughter, it's a pretty powerful emotional introduction to the movie, ensuring the viewers can fully understand the main villain's motivations for his actions. Speaking of Gore the God Butcher, after his god rejects him, he stumbles upon the Necro Sword, which is an ancient sword originating from the dawn of time that has the power to slay gods. This is actually Gore's traditional weapon in the comics, where he has ultimately been tied to Null, the god of symbiotes. Null created All Black, the Necro Sword, as a weapon that has the ability to slay gods. Interestingly, nothing about Thor Love and Thunder's Necro Swords contradicts the comic book portrayal. Taika Waititi gives New Zealand actor Jonathan Bra a cameo as Rapu, the god whose dismissive attitude towards his worshippers prompts Gore to take up the Necro Sword and slay him. Slay him? I barely know him. Which ignites the chain of events for the movie. Bra worked with Waititi before on What We Do in the Shadows, making this quite an appropriate cameo. It's also important to note that the god Rapu is an original character that was created specifically for Thor Love and Thunder with no basis in the comics. The beautiful Natalie Portman isn't the only previously established Marvel Cinematic Universe character that returns in Thor Love and Thunder. The Guardians of the Galaxy return, but of course you didn't miss that one. More surprisingly though, secondary characters from the first 2 Thor movies appear in the movie as well. Kat Dennings' Darcy Lewis and Stellan Skarsgård's Eric Selvig are 2 of the only people Jane Foster has told about her cancer. Spoiler. While Jamie Alexandra's Lady Sif is brought back as well. The most unexpected cameo would have to go to Idris Elba, who shows up at the end when Jane finds herself at the gates of Valhalla.
More on that later.
And then the ether stuck itself inside her, and she became...
Bet you didn't think we'd get scientific in this video. Well, we aren't, because I don't even know what this Einstein-Rosen bridge that Jane Foster talks about is. Regardless, Thor Love and Thunder presents Jane Foster as one of Earth's most celebrated scientists. Jane can't help but give a lecture on the wonderfully confusing Einstein-Rosen bridges theory when she sees another cancer patient reading her own book on the subject. Honestly, Google it, because good God, I'm just a content creator. I don't have much brain power. The Bifrost is the Einstein-Rosen bridge, explaining why Jane has such a good understanding of wormholes. Stormbreaker's power to summon the Bifrost becomes an essential part of the plot, meaning this is a surprisingly significant Easter egg. Now you're probably asking yourself if I understand all this, and to you I would say, not even in the slightest. If you paid even a little bit of attention, you would know that Thor Love and Thunder heads back to New Asgard, situated in the town of Tunsberg. This real-life place is generally regarded as the oldest town in Norway, and fictionally, its history has been tied to the Asgardians in the MCU. A flashback in Thor reveals that Odin led the Asgardians to war against the Frost Giants in Tunsberg in around 1000 AD, and the Red Skull discovered a cult of Odin worshippers, keeping the Tesseract hidden there in Captain America, the First Avenger. Thor Love and Thunder seems to confirm a popular fan theory that Odin died near Tunsberg in Thor Ragnarok. Speaking of New Asgard, it was rather funny and amusing to see New Asgard becoming a major tourist attraction. And side note, Ms. Marvel Episodes 1 AvengerCon includes details of tours around Tunsberg. It's wild to see an ice cream store call itself Infinity Cones, because the name of the store sounds like it says Infinity You get it. Y'all don't have to explain it to you. Humans have always tended to deal with tragedy with humor, and clearly that trait is shared by Asgardians. While filming Thor Ragnarok, the director, Taika Waititi, famously produced a number of shorts where Thor Odinson lived with a roommate who was named Daryl. These aren't considered canon, and they're deliberately kept out of the MCU timeline on Disney+. But, surprisingly, Daryl, Thor's old roommate, reprises his role in a blink-and-you'll-miss-it moment where he plays a wonderful tour guide. Easter eggs that involve actors are among my favorite. Taika Waititi revisits a trick from Thor Ragnarok, with a group of actors putting on a show that sums up the last film's plot. Matt Damon and Sam Neill return among the actors, reprising their roles as Loki, Thor, and Odin. This time, they're joined by Melissa McCarthy in the role of Hela. It's easy to miss, but Ben Falcone, McCarthy's real-life husband and often director and co-star, appears during the curtain call. One of the funniest bits in Thor: Love and Thunder were the screaming goats. Let me explain a bit more. Thor: Love and Thunder sees Odinson gifted 2 pet goats. In Norse mythology, Thor's chariot is pulled by Teeth Snarler and Teeth Grinder. Marvel adapted the idea in 1976, introducing Thor's goats, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder.
No, give me that. You have the little one.
Let's dive a bit deeper into some of the victims of Gore the God Butcher, because there's a few juicy deets in there. Thor: Love and Thunder lifts an image straight from the comics when it presents Gore the God Butcher victim Thalagar. The scene is brought to life straight from Thor: God of Thunder #3 by Jason Aaron, and it shows the tragic fate of Thalagar. The panel is practically brought to life on the big screen, with Korg's presence as the only alteration. In the comics, Thalagar was presented as the patron god of the galactic frontier who apparently wrestled black holes for fun, which just sounds so badass. We love an awkward love story. The awkward reunion between Jane Foster and Thor sees them disagreeing over how long they've been split up. Jane guesses 3 or 4 years, but Thor has a much more precise count. 8 years, 7 months, 6 days, give or take. There's a reason for this disagreement. Jane was among the people snapped out of existence in Avengers Infinity War, meaning she lost 5 years before she was restored. It's also important in confirming Brandon T. Snyder's novel, The Cosmic Quest Volume 2 Aftermath, shouldn't be considered MCU canon, because according to that book, Jane survived the snap. There were a good amount of flashbacks in Thor: Love and Thunder that really tells a lot of the story. One flashback establishes that Thor has S.H.I.E.L.D. boss Nick Flippin' Fury on speed dial during his time on Earth. Also, side note, Thor has Nick Fury's name spelled wrong. He has it spelled as Furry. Furries, man, they're scary. Love and Thunder features a major subplot involving Asgardian children kidnapped by Gore the God Butcher. The director actually put the real-life children of some of the stars of the movie in the movie. We got a list of them just for you, my friends. Chris Hemsworth's own son, Tristan, as young Thor, with his twin Sasha playing one of the Asgardians kidnapped by Gore. Natalie Portman's children are also among the kidnapped Asgardians. The director's children also appear in those scenes as well. Even Christian Bale's children join the cast. Werewolves are slowly becoming part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Thor: Love and Thunder subtly features the first of them, a child who reveals he's a Lycan, as werewolves are lycanthropes. There's also a mid-Asian, presumably a nod to a race with the power to turn things into gold. Oddly enough, there's never been a race known as the mid-Asian in the comics, but they do exist in Doctor Who. In a rather small detail that's easy to miss, we see Odin's ravens are name-dropped. These are nods to Odin's ravens, Munin and Hugin, who've been seen in the previous Thor films. In the comics, the ravens allow Odin to observe events across the universe. Comic book tie-ins are really far out, and honestly, there should be more of them, considering this is a movie about a comic book character. Thor wants to create a God Squad, a dream team of gods to take on the villainous Gore the God Butcher. And while he imagines this team, he name-drops some interesting key names from the comics. Let's go through a few, shall we? Zeus, played by Russell Crowe, after whom he styled himself, but also proves to be a great disappointment. Never meet your heroes, kids. Zeus' son, Hercules, who makes his official MCU debut in Thor: Love and Thunder's post-credit scene. Quetzalcoatl, good lord, that's a name, the feathered serpent and the sky god in the Aztec pantheon, who has teamed with Thor in the comics to battle cosmic enemies. Let's move on to something a little bit more chill. Speaking of the gods, Thor heads to Omnipotent City. That's a mouthful. Where all the greatest of gods gather in a so-called Council of the Godheads. The Council of the Godheads has appeared many times in the comics, seen in Thor: God of Thunder #3, the same issue that featured Thalagar's death. Thor hopes the Council of the Godheads will convene his God Squad, an approach they have taken on several occasions in the comics. Few of the gods in Omnipotent City, good God, how many more times can I say that, get speaking roles. although the credits reference Artemis and Minerva, members of the Greek/Roman pantheon in mythology and in the MCU. One god with dialogue is Dionysus. He's helping his father Zeus organize the next orgy. You're probably asking yourself, why they're organizing an orgy. It's a long story, we don't have time. In one of the best scenes in the movie, Zeus flicks off Thor's clothes and several female gods faint upon the sight, and all we're left with is thick boy Thor himself standing there naked. And all I can say is Captain America better step down from his thick throne. Odinson's back is decorated with tattoos in honor of Loki. It's nice to see a tribute of Loki, who died in Avengers Infinity War, but whose MCU role is far from over, given there are some variants in the multiverse. Continuing on the omnipotent city train, Thor, Valkyrie, and Jane all escape the city by blasting out on the Bifrost. As they do so, they pass two Celestials, who seem to be standing guard around the city. It's very possible Thor Love and Thunder is treating Celestials as simply another type of space god, thus subtly reconning Eternals, which suggests they were indeed the source of all life. If you thought we weren't going to go any deeper in Marvel lore, you'd be wrong. Go get your shovels, kids. The final battle between Thor and Gore the God Butcher takes place at the very center of the universe, in a shrine dedicated to eternity. The shrine features statues dedicated to some of Marvel's most powerful cosmic beings, including the Watcher from Marvel's What If, and the Living Tribunal. The Living Tribunal actually appeared in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in a blink and you'll miss it moment, in which Stephen Strange and America Chavez blasted past him as they ricocheted around the universe. But this isn't 25 Things You Missed in Multiverse of Madness. This is 25 Things You Missed in Thor Love and Thunder, baby. Who is Marvel's ultimate cosmic avatar, you ask? Well, Gore's goal is to use the Bifrost to reach eternity, the embodiment of all that is. The design of eternity in Thor Love and Thunder is adapted heavily from the comics, although in truth it's a little less spectacular. The MCU's eternity was previously teased in Guardians of the Galaxy, where he was featured on a mural dedicated to the Infinity Stones alongside other cosmic avatars, notably Death and Infinity. Alright, back to an easy one here. Thor Love and Thunder reveals the effects of Jane's chemotherapy are being reversed every time she uses the power of Mjolnir. It rightly senses she is needed, coming to her side even when she's in the hospital. This scene pays homage to Mighty Thor number 704 by Jason Aaron, in which events play out in roughly the same way. In the comics, Jane sensed Asgard was being destroyed by the Man-God, a being who hates the gods, which is very similar to Gore. And finally, let's dive a little bit deeper into the final post-credit scene. The scene reveals Jane Foster has been found worthy to enter Valhalla, the Norse afterlife. This idea is lifted straight from the Mighty Thor number 706, in which Jane died and found herself at the gates of Valhalla. In the comics, she was saved from death by Odin's magic, but there's nobody to save Jane in the MCU. For all that's the case though, this probably isn't the end of the road for Jane Foster. Moon Knight has already confirmed it's possible to come back from afterlife dimensions in the MCU. Thor Love and Thunder surely hasn't written Jane Foster out for good.
Welcome back. The biggest question of Marvel's Phase 4 is also the saddest. How does Wakanda and the MCU move on from the devastating passing of Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther? Wakanda Forever is here and answers that question valiantly, as well as introducing one of the most anticipated characters in all of Marvel Comics, the Submariner known as Namor. Now let's see how deep this thing goes with 25 Things You Missed in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. While Shuri begins to process her grief, she talks about how T'Challa hid his illness until it was too late to do anything about it. Boseman himself hid his illness from the public, instead choosing to do as much work as his body would allow him to before it took his life, turning in not only stunning performances as the King of Wakanda, but also as Levi in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and a starring role in the Russo brothers' non-Marvel picture 21 Bridges. Chadwick Boseman's portrayal of the Black Panther loomed large over the MCU as the character and actor became an instant favorite, leaving wide the question of what to do in the wake of his death. Technology has created a bit of an ethical gray area for many franchises to carry over characters after the original actor's passing. Peter Cushing's Grand Moff Tarkin reappears in Rogue One. This is just one example of many. It was decided early on to not digitally recreate Boseman and instead have the film stand as a tribute to his looming presence in the MCU for that brief moment of history. Ultimately, the odd man out in the Marvel movies is the Incredible Hulk starring Ed Norton as Bruce Banner. Later, the Banner character was recasted as Mark Ruffalo. So I'm not sure if that counts, but Black Panther Wakanda Forever is the first sequel in the MCU to not include the titular hero's original actor, except in flashbacks when Shuri is finally able to process her grief without, mentally torturing a small town in New Jersey. Wanda, looking at you. It's no secret that Kevin Feige has long wanted to bring his favorite character Namor to the MCU for a long time. Namor's secret underwater kingdom was first teased all the way back in Iron Man 2, at the same time as Wakanda, as a list of hotspots that S.H.I.E.L.D. was tracking. And clearly S.H.I.E.L.D. forgot to write it down because the CIA doesn't even consider Talokan as a potential culprit in the ocean-based attack. Either way, the core plan for Wakanda Forever didn't change with Boseman's passing, including the tone. Had Boseman lived, T'Challa would have been mourning the 5 years he missed as dust before Namor came by and let him know that opening Wakanda to the world endangered his secret water kingdom. The MCU has only been around for about 14 years, but it's already hard to imagine a cultural landscape without it. Part of that has been due to the MCU being a non-stop content machine. Black Panther Wakanda Forever marks the 30th feature film for the mega franchise. For the ever-important kinda continuity question, we know that this film takes place after Spider-Man No Way Home and after Eternals, and Ryan Coogler said that it takes place around the same time as Thor Love and Thunder and the upcoming Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. And it's also the end of a phase that has not ended with an Avengers film. As one could imagine, colors are used differently amongst cultures for various meanings and symbolism. The funeral for T'Challa and eventually Ramonda features dancers and mourners in white. This is actually a very common color for mourning across Asian and African cultures, as well as blue and in South Africa even red. The color is meant to symbolize purity and rebirth. Talokan is a sharp departure from the Atlantean world in the comics. Debuting in 1939, Namor beats all other rulers of Atlantis, including Aquaman, to the page. Since that time, however, there have been plenty of pretenders to the Atlantis throne. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato was trying to use the idea of Atlantis as an allegory, but it became a popular location for fictional underwater people. Given the cultural saturation of Atlantis, Namor had to stand out from his distinguished competitors like Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman. Black Panther Wakanda Forever shifted the focus from Plato's misunderstood allegory and arrived on the shores of the Aztec legend of Tlalocan, the first level of the 13 heavens and the last resting place of victims of floods, drownings, and lightning strikes. In the very intense scene where Namor says his enemies call him Namor, he also says what his people call him. I am not going to try and pronounce that name, but I will say that name is a reference to the Mayan deity that represents trade and support amongst peoples. During the filming of Captain America Civil War, King T'Chaka had a heart-to-heart with his son. Played by veteran South African actor John Kani, asked him this intimate moment why he was speaking to his son in English. In that moment, the language of Wakanda became the African language Xhosa, Kani's native tongue. With Namor's kingdom of Talokan being based on Mesoamerican mythology and history, actor Tenoch Huerta learned Mayan for the role, as the citizens of Talokan are made up of mostly Mesoamericans fleeing the conquistadors. And speaking of Tenoch Huerta, before being cast as Namor in Black Panther 2, he did not know how to swim. When director Ryan Coogler asked about his swimming skills, he simply responded, "I have yet to drown." After being cast, he took extensive swimming lessons to get up to par. The Talokans of the MCU don't date that far back. According to their story, the people of Talokan took to the water after being led to their own version of the heart-shaped herb in 1571. And that's not an insignificant date. 1571 was the beginning of the Mexican Inquisition. The Catholic monarchs at the time finally conquered the last Muslim holding in the Iberian Peninsula, setting the stage for the forced conversion that was the Spanish Inquisition to make its way to the Mexican territories. Seeing this in full force turns Namor cold towards the surface dwellers. In the comics, his name is supposed to translate to avenging slowly. For the MCU, it's a takeoff from El Niño Sin Amor, meaning the child without love, a nickname given to him by the missionaries. Set designer Hannah Bleacher indicated that the jaws around the throne of Namor are that of a megalodon, a hopefully extinct prehistoric ancestor to the modern shark. Seeing that the Talokan people have only been underwater for about 500 years, I think they got a pretty good chance of not running into one. One of the main hurdles of the film is for Shuri to overcome and process her grief before it consumes her and her nation. Just like in the comic book storyline where Shuri's Black Panther brings Wakanda into conflict with Atlantis and the hot-headed Namor, Shuri's anger has her bringing her country to the brink of a war that not even M'Baku wants a part of. Through M'Baku's counsel, Shuri comes around to the example set by her own brother when he spared M'Baku during a duel. So, like her brother when she has the stubborn Namor beat, she asks him to yield. This is clearly a callback to the first Black Panther film. Being 450 plus years old in a culture that relies heavily on oral traditions is a lot of responsibility. Namor takes it seriously though. Academy Award-winning production designer Hannah Bleacher returns to the franchise, designing the world we see, this time including all of the Mesoamerican influences in the design of Talokan. This includes the pictorial recording of history. At the end of the film, Namor is painting on a wall. This is the recording of the time where Wakanda and Talokan met. With Thanos invading and Wakanda being the front line of defense, it's easy to forget that Wakanda wasn't all peace, love, and pancakes at the end of the first Black Panther. T'Challa had broken century-old traditions by opening up their country to the world after a divide became clear between isolationists, people who wanted Wakanda to help the world, and people who wanted Wakanda to rule it. Black Panther ends in a civil war and eventually pits Okoye against her husband W'Kabi. W'Kabi is played by Daniel Kaluuya, and Kaluuya was set to return for the sequel, but scheduling conflicts arose with the filming of the sci-fi horror epic Nope, directed by Jordan Peele. In Wakanda Forever, we hear Ramonda mention that W'Kabi has been exiled due to taking up arms against the royal family. At 2 hours and 41 minutes, Wakanda Forever takes the number 2 slot for the longest Marvel movie behind Endgame, and edges out Eternals as the longest non-Avengers film. Another young Avenger joins the MCU in the form of Riri Williams, Ironheart. Riri Williams from the comics, like the movie, is a super young genius in the mold of Shuri, who Dominique Thorne originally auditioned for. There, she reverse engineers her own Iron Man suit from using parts of a damaged Mark 41. In contrast to the film, in the comic books, Riri is mentored by Tony Stark, and even takes his place after the Second Civil War finds him in a coma. Without a Tony Stark, Riri takes her mentorship from Shuri in Wakanda Forever. Ryan Coogler is a member of the independent auteurs that make up the MCU's director pool, having made a splash with his movie about the tragic New Year's shooting in Oakland by police officers with Fruitvale Station, and later impressing Sylvester Stallone with his new generation take on the Rocky franchise with Creed. For the first time, the established filmmaker utilized a collection of anamorphic lenses for the filming of Wakanda Forever. These lenses allow for a wider field of view on the same size frame, by distorting the image, which is then meant to be spread out by a projector lens to give an extra widescreen effect. This gives a true cinematic quality and is certainly fitting for this type of picture. The main conflict for the film revolves around what two rulers of vibranium-rich countries want to do about the child genius Riri Williams, who discovered a new way to detect vibranium so advanced even Shuri had a hard time reverse engineering it. Namor wants to get rid of her by any means necessary, but then again Riri has a Disney Plus series coming out, so that just won't do. Despite Shuri running all out of compassion, she's still her mother's daughter and her brother's sister. Not only that, but as a young genius who has not yet met Peter Parker, she has no real peers. So again, the Wakandan army is drafted to protect one special individual. It's kind of becoming a habit for them. Either way, it might sound familiar as a plot point because director Ryan Coogler was totally inspired by Terminator 2 Judgment Day. In that movie, the T-800 was programmed to protect John Connor for the future, and the T-1000 was programmed to do what the previous T-800 failed to do. Filming extensive underwater sequences takes a great deal of care. Costume designer Ruth E. Carter had to even test materials underwater to see how they moved. And it wasn't just Huerta who had to take swimming lessons, the entire cast needed to be trained in water movement and swimming techniques. The MCU is absolutely full of star-powered AI systems. Paul Bettany plays the voice of Jarvis, later to become Vision, and his respected wife plays the voice of the suit lady Karen in the Spider-Man series. Edith got her voice from No Way Home's editing department with the first assistant editor Dawn Michelle King, and when Jarvis has a bit of an outer body experience, we have Kerry Condon take the place of the AI system known as Friday in the Iron Man suits. And for Shuri's griot, named after the West African African role of history keeper, they turn to a South African who has a couple stories to tell himself, Daily Show host Trevor Noah. While there was a ton of speculation on who would take up the mantle of the Black Panther, the obvious leading choice was T'Challa's genius sister Shuri. But that didn't come without its complications. Being a superhero is hard, even with a dedicated effects team. While attached to a rig that allows actors to do the impossible superhero things that superheroes do, actor Letitia Wright injured her shoulder, shutting down production for about 4 months. However, she says the injury made her stronger as part of the journey to Wakanda Forever. Fans of Rihanna haven't heard from the pop star for the last 6 years, an eternity in pop music culture. Ryan Coogler showed her the trailer for the upcoming film and asked her to contribute to the soundtrack, and she agreed. He theorized that the movie came along at the right time in the singer's life. The song Lift Me Up debuted #1 on the Billboard charts. Namor the Submariner has had near misses with live-action film for about 70 years now. In the 1950s, producers tried to conjure up a TV series about the character, inspired by the popularity of George Reeves' Superman series. In the 1970s, there was another go at making it a series, as comic book shows were all the rage. Unfortunately, it was too similar to the Patrick Duffy show Man from Atlantis, and it was shelved. In 2006, when the MCU was still just a sparkle in Kevin Feige's eye, Terminator Rise of the Machines director John Mastow was tapped to bringing the Submariner to life. Lost actor Daniel Day Kim expressed interest in the role, as well as Vin Diesel. But in the end, this would leave Namor's distribution rights with Universal, preventing a solo Marvel film. At the time, there was already a man who seemed to be born in water that captured the public imagination, who was heavily fan-casted. This person was Michael Phelps. And before Wakanda Forever was fully cast, perhaps this was a negotiation technique, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson said he was quite frustrated with DC lowering the budget for Black Adam, and supposedly was in talks for Namor in this very film. Now, we all love Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine, but for many, some still hear the voice of Wolverine as a man with no name, a harsh whisper of a dirty Harry. That's right, Clint Eastwood. But Mr. Eastwood has a way bigger connection to comic books than we just have in our imagination. In 1978, he was approached to don the blue and red of the last son of Krypton in Richard Donner's Superman movie. However, he passed on that, but not because he hates superheroes, but because he had a favorite. He explained to Hero Complex that he was interested in more grounded superheroes. He then said he loved Namor the Submariner, and went on to explain he collected the comic books as a kid. After being cut from the bad guy roster in the first Black Panther, the Submariner was not going to be denied his 70-year march to the live-action screen again, but M'Baku actor Winston Duke was willing to try. M'Baku, aka the White Ape, is one of the Black Panther's longest-running foes. Comic book M'Baku seeks the throne for his own nefarious goals. MCU M'Baku just has a difference in opinion regarding the direction of the nation. Unfortunately for M'Baku's ambitions, the charm that Winston Duke imbued in the character has endeared us towards him. So when Duke campaigned for his character to become the bad guy, he was turned down, instead to fulfill the role of mentor and protector to Shuri. There will always be new secret nations and mystical lands within the Marvel lore that have yet to be discovered. We have the Savage Lands, we have Genosha, we even have the huge dragon head that Madripoor is built on. Yes, that's a thing. Either way, I'm sure we can all agree that there are a bunch of 19th century explorers in the Marvel lore who said, you know what, we'll just let that one be. My name is Noah Marks. I hope you learned something today. Have a good one.